Welcome to Amazing Incredible Stories on tonight's documentary, Psychology of the Gen X Feral Engineer.
Do you remember the sound? Click. That specific, heavy clunk of a deadbolt locking behind you. It's 3 p.m. You're 10 years old. You have a shoelace around your neck with a brass key dangling from it. And ahead of you, absolute silence. There were no parents waiting in the driveway. There were no tracking apps on a phone that didn't exist. There was absolutely no leash. You were doing things back then that would get parents arrested today. You were mowing lawns at 8 years old. Not for fun, but because your parents were divorced, mom was working, and someone had to step up. If your bike chain snapped 3 miles from home, you didn't call for a ride. You didn't call anyone. You found a rock, you hammered it back in place, and you rode home. If you wiped out, you checked for blood, you wiped it on your jeans, and you kept moving. You didn't know it then, but you weren't just playing. You were in training, because that feral kid who learned to survive without instructions, he's the one keeping the modern world running today. We call this psychology, the feral engineer. To understand the feral engineer, you have to understand the environment you grew up in. We call it the Great Silence. Imagine a world with zero digital noise, no notifications pinging in your pocket, no GPS tracking your location, no stream of likes or hearts telling you you're doing a good job. It was a world without a safety net. And more importantly, it was a world without a leash. But that didn't mean there wasn't a plan. When you walked into that empty house, you weren't walking into a playground. You were reporting for duty at Camp Mom, a boot camp run by the toughest drill sergeant on earth. She didn't teach you to be soft. She taught you to be regimented and tough as nails. There was a piece of paper sitting right there on the counter. That note wasn't a polite request. It didn't ask how you felt about doing chores. It was a direct order from high command. It didn't say, "Sweetie, if you have time, maybe start dinner." Instead, it said, "Put the pot roast in the oven at 375 for an hour. Vacuum the living room, and there better be lines in that carpet." Or, "Defrost the chicken by 5:30. There were no excuses because it was mom's way or the highway. You did your chores because you knew the inspection was coming the second the car door slammed. You had a hard deadline, and you answered to a commanding officer you were absolutely terrified to disobey. This is where the feral engineer mindset was born. When you faced a problem at home, when you had a flat tire on your bike or the window was broken, there was no Google to ask. There was no YouTube tutorial. There was just you, the silence, and the problem. Your brain had to rewire itself to solve the puzzle because there was literally no one else to ask. And this started way before 3 p.m. For those of you with divorced parents or moms who were sleeping because they just worked a double shift at the hospital, the morning was just as feral. You didn't wait around for a bowl of cereal to be poured for you. You figured it out the old-fashioned way. By trial and error. You were 8 or 9 years old, dragging a chair over just to reach the dials on the gas stove. You'd turn the knob, wait for that terrifying click, click, whoosh, and suddenly you were cooking over an open blue flame. You were frying eggs, bacon, and cooking medium rare steak like a champ. If there was leftover ham from the night before, you made do with what you had. You toasted an English muffin, fried an egg, threw on a slice of cheese, and made your own egg McMuffin. And let me tell you, it was so damn good because it tasted like freedom. Of course, if one of your older siblings caught a whiff of it, they'd try to swipe it right off your plate. But Camp Mom taught you to fight for what was yours. You stood your ground, and that's when you earned respect. You learned to provide for yourselves before you were tall enough to reach the top shelf. That wasn't neglect. That was the beginning of the Heathen Empire. So what happens when that feral engineer grows up? They don't just become normal, docile citizens. They become heathens. I don't mean that in a religious sense. I mean it in the literal sense. A heathen is simply someone who refuses to worship the local gods. And look around you. The modern world has a very specific set of gods it wants you to bow down to. It worships safety, feelings, and optics. It cares more about how something looks on social media than how it actually works in reality. You simply refuse to do that. And that is why Gen X feels so alienated right now. It's a psychological refusal to play along. You still worship the old gods of competence, reality, and how the world actually works. If a plan sounds nice but doesn't work, you reject it. If a person talks a big game but can't change a flat tire, you don't trust them. If it works, you like it. If it doesn't, you don't care how nice it is, you throw it out. Because you come from a world where 1 + 1 = 2. You don't live in a world where 1 + 1 = 3 just because it fits the narrative. Where did you get the nerve to reject the status quo? You learned it in the forbidden zone. Every single neighborhood you grew up in had a boundary, a hard line in the sand that you were strictly told not to pass. Sometimes it was a specific house. Sometimes it was a supermarket or a busy street. Sometimes it was just a big oak tree at the edge of the neighborhood. But for many of you, it was the woods. You all had those woods. And deep in those woods, there was always a trail that led to the Forbidden Zone. That was where you met up with friends from the other side of town. That was where the jurisdiction of parents ended. And the Empire began. You were told not to go there. You went anyway. Crossing those lines didn't break you. It built you. You don't fear the dark. You explored it. That willingness to step into the unknown is exactly why Gen X is the toughest generation on Earth. Even Arthur Fonzarelli would be proud. And if you agree, let me know in the comments what the Fonz would say about the modern world. Because we all know he was the undisputed king of cool. So how were you trained? You didn't learn physics in a classroom with a textbook. You learned it through first principles. You learned from the two harshest teachers on the planet, pain and gravity. Modern childhood is about avoiding risk. Your childhood was about managing it. Remember the broken bone badge? Today, if a kid breaks an arm, it's a tragedy. It's a lawsuit. For you, it was a trophy. You walked into school with that plaster cast and you were a celebrity. You didn't hide the injury. You handed out markers and let everyone sign it. That cast wasn't a sign of failure. It was proof that you pushed the machine to the absolute limit and survived. That pain taught you something valuable. It taught you that you could break, and more importantly, that you could heal. This created a mindset of resourcefulness over resources. The modern mindset is, it's broken, buy a new one. The heathen mindset is, it's broken, hand me the duct tape. You learned this the hard way. Think about the bike chain. You're 3 miles from home, the sun's going down. Your bell-bottom jeans get caught in the sprocket. The pedals lock up. You go over the handlebars and snap. You break your arm. And the chain. You didn't have a cell phone to call your parents. You didn't have a credit card to call an Uber. You had 2 choices. You could walk for an hour in the dark, or you could become a one-armed mechanic. So you flipped the bike over. You found a rock. You got grease all the way up to your elbows, and you forced that chain back on. In that moment, you learned the most important lesson of the feral engineer. Competence equals mobility. If you can't fix it, you're stranded. If you can fix it, you're free. This is why you have such a problem with the modern black box world. You pop the hood of a car today, and what do you see? A giant sheet of plastic hiding the engine. You can't see the belts. You can't reach the spark plugs. You don't have the error codes to assess what's going on. You are locked out of your own machine. And if you're a farmer, it's even worse. You're standing in a field with a $500,000 tractor that is dead in the water. Not because the engine is broken, but because the software says you aren't allowed to fix it. It's the same with everything else. Batteries you can't change, phones you can't open, systems you can't touch without voiding the warranty. You hate that. It feels like a cage. You need to open the box. You need to see the gears. And because you know how things work, you react differently when they break. You have what I call catastrophic calm. You see this in car accidents. When modern people crash, there's panic, screaming, and hysteria. But watch a Gen Xer get extracted from a mangled car. You don't scream. You sigh. You look around. You check for blood. You assess the damage. You don't panic because you never expected the ride to be safe in the first place. You just figure out how to get the chain back on.
Time, weather, and...
We're living through a strange moment in history. The technology is getting smarter, but the people are becoming helpless. We're facing a competence crisis. The systems that run our lives, the power grid, the supply chain, the internet, are becoming one big house of cards. But the people tasked with maintaining them are terrified of making a decision without a committee meeting or a digital tutorial. When the internet goes down, or the storm hits, or the supply chain breaks, notice who doesn't panic. Notice who steps up. It isn't the influencers, it's the people who were trained in the heathen void. I'm talking about the commercial diver, locked in saturation at 600 feet, risking nerve damage in the pitch black just to keep the fuel flowing. I'm talking about the high voltage lineman hanging by a strap in a freezing ice storm just to keep the grid online. And I'm talking about the ER nurse who has literally had to hold a stranger's heart in their hands, or try to put a brain back into a shattered skull, and then go home and make dinner like it was nothing. This is the ultimate superpower of the Heathen Empire. You're the only thing standing between order and chaos. The modern world might mock you for being out of touch or rough around the edges, but secretly, they're terrified of what would happen if you actually clocked out. Because when the app stops working and the GPS fails and the lights go out, they don't call tech support, they call a feral engineer. So here's my advice to you. Don't apologize for your scars. Don't apologize for your grit. And don't let them put a leash on you now. You might feel like an alien in this soft world, but you're actually the most valuable asset in it. The world misses the feral engineer. Even if they won't admit it, stay feral. And if you've got a story about a time you had to fix it, survive it, or hold it together when everyone else panicked, a true feral engineer or heathen moment, drop it in the comments below. Brutal honesty is welcomed. I want to hear how you earned your stripes.